Hello, my name is Ian Scales, you're watching TelecomTV, and we're about to embark upon one of our alternative agendas. I have with me today Robin Duke-Woolley, who's from Beecham Research, and we're going to be talking about some aspects of M2M. Robin, welcome. So Robin, one of the big issues that we're seeing in M2M very recently is this idea of sunsetting. This is where an operator in 2G starts to plan to get rid of the 2G part of his network to bring in LTE. And this is an issue which has really come to the fore now because people are moving to LTE at a great rate in the US, but also in Europe. What sort of an issue is that going to become to the M2M industry?
Well, I think it's going to be more of a problem in North America than it is in Europe. So in the US, they have a particular problem, which is spectrum, lack of spectrum. And AT&T, of course, now just said that it's going to shut down its network, its 2G network in the beginning of 2017. So that does provide a bit of a real problem for users in the M2M space, because users in the M2M space, about 95% of applications at the moment use 2G. There is a move over towards 3G. There are some applications that need that kind of speed and need that kind of extension. So it's really a question of whether they can afford it. And the costs for implementing 3G are higher than the 2G. And of course, we're looking at 4G much further out, and that's considerably higher costs to implement. But there's an interesting issue here, and that is that the network efficiency of 4G is considerably better than either 3G or 2G. It's really an IP-based network schema. So interestingly enough, if the costs for 4G can be brought down more quickly, like develop the volumes and so forth, then maybe we'll get to a point where it becomes competitive with 3G in the not too distant future. I say not too distant future, we're talking about 2016, 2017 before that's even practical. But that does raise some very interesting points. So you've got 2G spectrum needs to be reallocated by some of the mobile operators because they're running out of capacity elsewhere for the smartphone demand and so forth. So if you take out 2G, move people towards 3G, then the costs of doing that could be quite high. And then maybe they might then, in 5 years' time, or 5 years after that, then need to move out to 4G. So perhaps we get into sort of questions like, why don't we go straight to 4G? So I think that there are a number of issues here. Now, in Europe, it's a little bit different because we've got things like emergency call for EU, which is likely to be, if it's introduced at all, it's likely to be 2G, not 3G, because there's a big cost constraint in introducing that. If that goes ahead, then the mobile operators in Europe will support 2G for a much longer time period. So really the issues of moving 2G to 3G in Europe are nothing like as constraining as they are in North America.
So that's the operator perspective, Robin. What about things from the device perspective? An important thing is how quickly will 3G and 4G device costs reduce so that they can become viable like 2G devices?
Well, of course, when we look at modules, we tend to focus on modules as being the sort of connectivity element in a device. But you do have to consider that when you compare it with the rest of the cost of the device, it's actually a relatively small part of it. Nevertheless, having said that, there is a significant difference between the cost of a 2G module and the cost of a 3G module at the moment. And there is a very substantial difference in the cost between a 3G module and a 4G module at the moment. One can expect them all to reduce over time. However, what's happening in the marketplace at the moment is that the volumes of 2G modules are much higher than the volumes of 3G modules. So in fact, the prices of 2G modules is actually declining more quickly than the price of 3G modules. And similarly with 4G. So there has to be a real reason to increase the volumes in 3G to reduce the costs further. And that is an issue, I think, because unless it's pushed to 3G, as I was saying just now, eCall in Europe is standardising, we think, on 2G, and that's all associated with the costs of doing that. That would then drive the volumes for all cars would then need to be fitted out with this when they're sold in Europe from about, say, 2015, 2016, that sort of time frame. And that would dramatically increase the volumes of 2G, but not the volumes of 3G. So then you get the costs of 2G reducing even more quickly, and 3G's kind of static. So those issues need to be taken into account. And I don't think that they have been fully in the schema of things at the moment.
Now, backwards compatibility is obviously a big issue in M2M, and it's something that cellular operators in particular can have some difficulty with, can't they?
We try not to cut off, when we go to 3G, we try not to cut off to 2G. In fact, part of the 3G standard is to have fallback to 2G. It's really if you want to then reuse the spectrum for something else, then yeah, clearly it's not going to be available, so you have to do something else. So it is an issue, but when you compare it with other technologies like Wi-Fi, yeah, so Wi-Fi's been around for quite a while. The standard's been there for a while. It's not going to change anytime soon, and it's in free spectrum, so it's not going to be reallocated for something else. That gives some benefits possibly and some potential problem areas, because if it's a free area, then you can get congestion in local areas. You have difficulty in providing a service level, and you might need to have that service level. So that's one issue that you need to look at. Well, the costs of Wi-Fi and wireless LAN, industrial wireless LAN, have reduced considerably over time, so that they are, I think, becoming more attractive as alternatives for some applications, local area applications. Yeah.
Wi-Fi could become more important in the future. What sort of applications do you envisage Wi-Fi suiting, and how is that side of the market going to develop?
Well, I think there are already two areas that I would see they're going to develop quite in particular. There's the whole area around the smart home and what happens in the home environment. And although you might want to use, say, a cellular link for the home hub outwards, what you use in the home environment could well be Wi-Fi. It's a very acceptable and a relatively low cost requirement. And I think that there are benefits of that over the very short range wireless, like for example Zigbee and Bluetooth, but that's another story. The other area is like citywide services, where you could be looking at a set of services that are offered by the borough council or something like that, street sweeping, things like that, bin monitoring, things like that, which all then connect through a citywide Wi-Fi system. And I think that when we get onto smart cities, there's going to be a lot that uses a mix of technologies, and Wi-Fi is very much up in there as being one of the major technologies that's going to be used.
So how would you place cellular and Wi-Fi in the future? What sort of balance is there going to be between the two in terms of the M2M market?
Well, we're going to have a much richer mixture of technology use over time. We're moving from what we call point-to-point solutions in M2M to a multiverse of solutions in the Internet of Things, where a great deal more things are connected. And you need both short range and you need long range, and you need more than one connectivity type in any one solution as well. So there's going to be a lot of complementary nature between those. So I think that they're all going to increase substantially. I think that there is an issue, this issue that I talked about before, about users and the sunsetting of spectrum in cellular will cause people to think about whether they should use cellular or use, for example, Wi-Fi in particular applications. And I think we might see a bit of that. I don't think that it's going to have a substantial impact on the overall market, but I think that there's going to be some shifting of views about that, and that's a reflection of just what the mobile operators are having to do to conserve spectrum for new things. So we've got that going along as one avenue, one volatility in the market, if you like. And on the other side, we've got things like Wi-Fi becoming much cheaper. The module costs for Wi-Fi are going down astronomically. So we can use Wi-Fi in a lot of areas that we didn't even think of using it before.
That was very interesting. Thank you very much.
Thanks.